The legendary physicist Richard Feynman once proposed a concept that, honestly, at the time sounded like pure science fiction.
Oh, absolutely. It was way out there.
Right. He looked at a ribosome, and for you listening, that's a tiny structure inside a cell, and he didn't just see like a biological blob doing its thing. He saw a machine.
A literal functional machine.
Exactly. A machine that utilizes what we now call protein domain dynamics. He suggested that if we could truly understand those mechanical wiggles, the bending, the hinging, the tiny physical movements of these massive molecular complexes, we could actually harness them.
We could engineer them.
Yeah, engineer them to do our own heavy lifting. Welcome to this deep dive, by the way. Today, we are exploring the massive, wildly ambitious world of biological engineering.
And it is a massive world.
It really is. Our mission today is to uncover how humans are taking the hardcore, rigid tools of traditional engineering and, well, applying them to the squishy, seemingly chaotic world of living biology, and doing it to create usable, economically viable products.
Which is such a wild shift. Because for decades, Feynman's vision was just trapped in the realm of theory. We simply didn't have the observational tools to see a machine that small actually in motion.
But that barrier is gone now.
It is entirely gone. Today, using highly advanced techniques like neutron spin echospectroscopy, we can actually watch the machine at work.
Neutron spin echospectroscopy, that sounds intense.
It is a mouthful, yeah. But think of it like a highly sophisticated molecular radar.
Okay, I can picture that.
So we bounce a beam of polarized neutrons off these biological molecules, and then we measure the slight changes in their spin when they scatter back.
Wow, so you're tracking the echo, basically.
Right, exactly. It lets us measure the rapid, real-time mechanical bending of a protein. We are literally watching the gears turn.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second. It's as if we've been handed the ultimate multi-billion-year-old operating system, nature itself. And after centuries of just, marveling at the code, we're finally learning how to write our own apps for it.
That is the perfect analogy. And that shift in perspective is what makes this field so powerful. To write those apps, we have to move past traditional biology.
Because historically, biology was just an observational science, right?
Right. You look at an organism, you poke it, you describe its behavior. But biological engineering is the literal marriage of pure and applied sciences with living tissue.
Which sounds completely contradictory.
It does. We are taking the foundational mathematical principles of engineering, things like mass and heat transfer, fluid mechanics, thermodynamics, polymer science.
And you're forcing them to shake hands with living cells.
Exactly.
I'm struggling to see the connective tissue there, though. I mean, if you look at classical mechanics or circuit design, you're dealing with predictable static materials like steel or copper.
Very stable materials, yeah.
But a living cell has, millions of chaotic variables interacting simultaneously. How do you apply rigid thermodynamic math to something that dynamic without the whole model just falling apart?
Well, it requires a massive leap in how we measure energy. Biological systems, despite all their chaos, are still physical systems.
Okay.
They are still bound by the laws of physics and chemistry. A cell metabolizing glucose is still exchanging heat and energy.
So it's still doing the math, just really quietly.
Exactly. The genius of the biological engineer is isolating those variables well enough to make the math work on a microscopic scale.
Can you give me an example of what that looks like?
Sure. So, say you want to engineer a bacterium to produce an industrial chemical instead of its normal waste products.
Like turning it into a tiny factory.
Right. You have to rewrite its metabolic pathways to do that. And you do that by tracking the exact energy states, the thermodynamics of those new chemical reactions.
How do you even track heat from a single bacteria?
Bioengineers use techniques like microcalorimetry. It measures the minuscule heat output of these cellular processes.
Microcalorimetry, wow.
Yeah, they aren't just crossing their fingers. They are calculating the exact energy flux required to optimize that specific chemical yield.
So we're moving from observing nature to predicting and controlling it. The goal is to mimic, modify, or augment these systems to create tangible end products.
Very tangible.
We're talking about bacteria specifically designed to eat pollutants, portable, rapid disease diagnostic devices, biopharmaceuticals, even tissue-engineered organs.
And achieving that level of control took decades of trial and error. I mean, the desire to merge machines with biology isn't a uniquely 21st century phenomenon.
Right. If you look at the timeline, the seeds were planted way before World War II. But the post-war era is where the acceleration really happened, didn't it?
Yeah, the 1950s brought this massive technological boom in electronics.
Right, and in 1954, there was this British scientist, a broadcaster named Heinz Wolff.
Yes, Heinz Wolff.
He actually coined the term bioengineering while working at the National Institute for Medical Research, and he later went on to become the director of the Division of Biological Engineering at Oxford.
Which was a huge deal. That was a major milestone for getting the discipline recognized at the university level.
But when you look at what they were actually doing in the 50s, it looks nothing like what we are talking about today.
Not at all.
Yeah.
They were basically treating the human body like a wet, complicated radio.
A wet radio, that's a great way to put it.
I mean, early bioengineering was essentially just electrical engineering applied in a hospital setting. They were building medical monitors, early pacemakers, imaging equipment.
So it was all about applying external wires and metal to flesh.
Exactly. They were measuring outputs, but they weren't altering the biological mechanisms.
Because they couldn't. And that's where they hit a massive wall, right?
The huge wall.
You had this bunch of highly trained electrical engineers who realized they were trying to fix a biological car without knowing what the engine was.
Yeah, they were building devices for a system they just couldn't fully comprehend.
And they literally had to go back to school. They had to study biology, psychology, and medicine just to bridge the gap.
Which completely fractured the traditional academic model at the time. You suddenly had engineers admitting, hey, we can't just force a machine onto a biological system.
The machine has to speak the language.
Right. It had to speak the chemical and physical language of the human body. You had to understand the fluid dynamics of blood before you could build a better artificial heart valve.
That makes total sense. And that friction basically birthed the modern educational foundation of the field.
It did. By 1966, the first official biological engineering program in the United States was launched at the University of California, San Diego.
And from there, the academic world had to catch up rapidly. Programs launched at MIT, Utah State University, all across the globe, which kind of brings us to the sheer scale of the field today.
The scale is staggering.
According to MIT professor Doug Laufenberger, biological engineering operates on a spectrum of size that is almost hard to wrap your head around. It doesn't just stop at the cellular level.
No, the spectrum is vast. I mean, when we think of traditional engineering, we usually picture things at human scale.
Right? Bridges, combustion engines, skyscrapers.
Exactly. But biological engineering starts at the absolute microscopic molecular level. We're dealing with DNA, protein chemistry, immunology, pharmacology.
Invisible stuff?
The invisible stuff.
Huh?
Then it scales up to cellular and tissue-based systems, like building living biosensors.
Okay.
Then it scales up again to macroscopic organisms like whole plants and animals.
And it goes all the way up to entire biomes, which blew my mind. We're talking about environmental modifications using biological engineering for surface soil protection.
Slope stabilization, shoreline protection.
Yeah, windbreaks. Many traditional agricultural engineering departments across the globe have actually rebranded themselves. They're now agricultural and biological
Or
engineering.
biosystems engineering, yeah.
But let me push back on that scale for a second, because it seems contradictory.
How so?
Well, if I'm designing a microscopic biosensor, I'm working with proteins and lab equipment. But if I'm stabilizing a shoreline, I'm working with ocean tides, soil mechanics, and massive ecosystems. Are we really saying those two people are using the exact same engineering logic?
We are. It comes down to systems thinking. And the foundational logic is remarkably similar.
Really?
Yeah. Whether you are looking at the flow of a single protein across a cell membrane or the flow of nitrogen across an entire agricultural valley, you are fundamentally dealing with mass transfer.
Mass transfer. Okay, so it's inputs and outputs.
Exactly. You are looking at inputs, outputs, environmental constraints, and system equilibrium. Think about agricultural runoff.
Okay, the fertilizer getting into the rivers.
Right. If you view an entire river basin through the lens of fluid mechanics and chemical kinetics, you can engineer biological interventions.
Like what kind of intervention?
Like targeted bacterial mats or modified root systems. Things that process those excess nutrients before they destroy the ecosystem downstream.
Wow. So the bioengineer's superpower is basically the ability to zoom in and out.
That's exactly it.
Which perfectly explains why the education to become one of these engineers is so brutal.
Oh, it's intense.
A student pursuing a Bachelor of Science in this field typically spends 3 to 5 years juggling a curriculum that sounds like a paradox. They are sitting in a classroom learning genetic engineering and enzyme kinetics.
And then walking across the hall to study mechanical dynamics, thermodynamics, and electronics.
They have to speak both languages fluently.
And when they finally graduate and enter the real world, they step into a landscape of subdisciplines that are fundamentally reshaping our relationship with the natural world.
Let's dive into those subdisciplines, actually, because this feels like stepping into nature's R&D department.
It really does.
The first one is biomimetics. This is all about imitating models, systems, and elements of nature to solve complex human problems.
And there's a very famous example of this.
Yes, the classic example is Velcro. So George Mistral was out walking his dog, and he noticed how stubbornly little plant burrs stuck to his dog's hair.
Right, they just wouldn't come out.
Exactly. So he put those burrs under a microscope, saw the tiny hook and loop structure, and just engineered a synthetic version. So we're basically letting evolution do the heavy lifting for millions of years, and then we just swoop in, copy the homework, and file the patent.
I mean, it's a funny way to phrase it, but there's a serious efficiency argument there.
It's efficient stealing.
Well, we aren't just being lazy. We're recognizing that human engineering is fundamentally limited by our short iteration cycles.
That's true. We haven't been doing this for billions of years.
Exactly. Evolution has spent billions of years stress testing designs for durability, aerodynamics, energy conservation. Biomimetics is about recognizing that nature has already solved the physics problem. We just have to translate that biological solution into synthetic materials.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, if biomimetics is borrowing nature's blueprints, then bioprinting is basically using nature's ink.
Yes, utilizing biomaterials to literally print cells, tissues, and potentially entire organs.
But the challenge there isn't just squirting cells out of a nozzle, right?
Yeah, far from it. The real engineering hurdle in bioprinting isn't just stacking the cells, it's keeping them alive.
Because they need blood.
Right. If you 3D print a solid chunk of liver tissue, the cells on the outside might survive, but the cells in the center will immediately suffocate and die.
Oh, wow. Because they have no blood supply.
Exactly. So biological engineers have to simultaneously print a microscopic, fully functional vascular network.
Tiny artificial capillary.
Yeah, embedded right within the tissue. They use specialized bioinks that hold their structural shape long enough for the cells to bind together.
While still letting nutrients flow through.
Exactly, allowing nutrients to flow through the tissue the moment it's printed.
That is incredible. And it naturally bleeds into biorobotics, because instead of just printing static organs, we are combining advanced electronics with biological materials to create things that move.
This is where it gets really sci-fi.
It does. We're talking about prosthetics that interface directly with the human nervous system, interpreting electrical signals from the brain to move robotic fingers. Or even wilder biohybrid robots.
Biohybrid robots are a perfect illustration of treating biology as a mechanical component.
How do they even work?
Engineers are literally taking living muscle tissue, usually grown in a lab, and attaching it to synthetic 3D printed skeletons.
Wait, really? Living muscle on a plastic skeleton?
Yes. By stimulating that muscle tissue with electrical impulses, the muscle contracts and moves the robotic skeleton.
It's a machine powered by living cellular engines.
It bridges the gap between organic life and synthetic robotics in a way that Heinz Wolff could only have dreamed of back in 1954.
But biological engineering isn't just about healthcare or, building biocyborgs. There's a massive application in environmental health engineering, too.
Oh, absolutely.
Applying these principles to control the environment for human survival. And I don't just mean building a better air conditioner. We are talking about life support systems for the extremes of human exploration.
Like outer space.
Outer space, the bottom of the ocean.
Right. When you put a human in a tin can in the vacuum of space, you essentially have to bioengineer a closed-loop ecosystem from scratch.
Because you can't just open a window.
You definitely can't open a window.
Yeah.
Earth's biosphere naturally recycles air, purifies water, and processes waste through massive, interconnected biological cycles.
So in a spacecraft, you have to shrink all of that down.
You have to recreate that entire planetary process within a few cubic meters. You engineer biological reactors utilizing specific algae or bacteria that scrub carbon dioxide from the air, produce oxygen, and break down human waste into usable water and nutrients.
Wow.
You are mathematically balancing the metabolic inputs and outputs of the crew with the metabolic inputs and outputs of your engineered microbiome.
It's basically a highly controlled, high-stakes terrarium.
That's a great way to look at it.
Which ties perfectly into biochemical engineering and bioprocess engineering. This is where we get into fermentation and utilizing microscopic systems to synthesize entirely new products.
Right, turning vats of microbes into microscopic factories.
To produce biopharmaceuticals, specialized proteins, or bioenergy. But again, you can't just throw yeast in a bucket and hope for the best.
Not at an industrial scale. This isn't a backyard brewery. We are talking about massive, multi-thousand-liter bioreactors.
Okay.
At that scale, the sheer stress from the mechanical mixing blades could literally rip the cell walls of your microbes apart.
Oh man, so you could just blend your own factory by accident.
Exactly. You have to calculate the perfect fluid dynamics to keep the mixture homogeneous without destroying your biological factories. You need the temperature, the dissolved oxygen levels, and the pH to be absolutely perfect throughout the entire tank.
So much precise math.
It requires incredibly precise thermodynamic and fluid control, which brings us right back to the beginning of our discussion, really, applying strict physical math to living organisms.
It really is a full circle moment. We've taken you listening on a massive journey today. Starting from Richard Feynman staring at the mechanical gears of a ribosome, all the way to electrical engineers in the 50s realizing they needed to crack open a biology textbook.
It's been a long road.
We've moved from printing vascular networks to designing living life support systems for astronauts. But a field with this much power, the power to literally rewrite the physical and genetic code of living things, it requires serious organizational infrastructure.
And that infrastructure is what keeps the field moving forward safely and systematically.
Like ABET, right.
Yes, the Accreditation Board for Engineering and Technology. They are the ones rigorously evaluating and accrediting these intense multidisciplinary university programs.
Making sure the students actually know what they're doing.
Exactly. They ensure that the next generation of engineers actually has the dual mastery of biology and physics required to do this work without causing catastrophic system failures.
And then you have organizations focusing on the broader impact, like the American Institute for Medical and Biological Engineering, AMBE, and the Institute of Biological Engineering, IBE.
And their role is fascinating.
Yeah.
Because they aren't the ones in the lab coats pipetting fluids or building the biohybrid robots.
Right. They aren't doing the direct research.
No, their primary mission is public education, advocacy, and the overall advancement of the field. They exist to translate the value of biological engineering to policymakers and the public.
They offer scholarships to promising students, recognize incredible innovations, and basically build the societal framework that allows this research to continue.
They are crucial for maintaining public trust, ensuring people understand that this discipline is built on careful, mathematically calculated engineering principles.
Which is so important because this field is blurring the lines of reality every single day. I mean, we're building machines out of muscle and using cells as factories. So to wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with something to chew on.
We've talked extensively about applying rigorous engineering math to biology to create machines. And we've talked about using billions of years of biological evolution to inspire our engineering.
Yeah.
So as we get better at bioprinting functional organs, as we build more sophisticated biohybrid robots that run on living tissue, and as we program synthetic cells to manage our ecosystems, think about this.
Okay.
In the next few decades, will there even be a meaningful distinction left between a biological organism and a manufactured machine?
A completely wild thought to end on. If nature is the ultimate operating system, it looks like we're not just writing apps anymore, we're starting to build our own hardware. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the world around you, keep looking at the hidden mechanics and everything, and we'll see you next time.
Imagine you are standing in this really prominent 17th century laboratory.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
Right. And the highly respected scientist standing in front of you has just proposed a genuinely wild theory. I mean, he claims that invisible forces can reach across millions of miles of completely empty space, just to pull massive objects toward each other.
Wow. With like no physical mechanism at all.
Exactly. There are no ropes, no physical gears, just this invisible pull. And he is immediately criticized by his peers. I mean, they call his theory ridiculous. They actually call it occult magic.
That's just wild to think about today.
It really is, because that scientist was Isaac Newton. and his magic was gravity.
It completely shatters the image we usually have, doesn't it? I mean, when you hear the word occult, you don't typically think of the foundational figures of modern physics.
Right, definitely not.
You think of heavy velvet curtains, the smell of cheap incense, maybe a dimly lit parlor with someone hovering over a crystal ball.
Yeah, it feels like a relic, something
Yeah.
fundamentally irrational or deeply rooted in spooky folklore or, Hollywood tropes.
Absolutely.
But that is exactly what we are stripping away today. So welcome to this deep dive. Today we are unpacking a single, incredibly dense repository of history, which is the Wikipedia page on the occult.
It's a massive topic.
It really is. We're going to look past the curses and the black magic stereotypes, to uncover what this concept actually means historically. We're going to see how it functioned as early science and how humanity's relationship with the hidden forces of nature has evolved right alongside our greatest technological leaps.
And to really understand that evolution, we have to start at the very root. Because the etymology of the word itself sets up a framework that just changes how you view everything that comes after.
Okay, let's get into it.
So the term occult derives directly from the Latin word occultus. And literally translated, it just means clandestine, hidden, or secret.
Hidden. So not necessarily spooky or demonic, just hidden.
Right, exactly. For centuries, it was simply used to describe knowledge of the hidden.
Which is fascinating because today we use occult as basically a synonym for paranormal, right? We contrast it directly with science.
Yeah, that's the modern binary.
Science is the knowledge of the measurables, the things we can see and test. And the occult is the unmeasurable ghost in the room. But in the 16th century, those boundaries didn't really exist, did they?
Not at all. I mean, Rudder Hanegraaff, he's a really prominent Dutch scholar of esotericism. He points out that these 16th century occult sciences were actually systematic, rigorous investigations of nature.
They were real science for the time.
Yes. The people practicing them were constructing these complex theoretical frameworks to understand natural processes. They were essentially early scientists. The key difference is that their science relied on a foundational belief in what they called occult qualities.
I really want to break down this idea of occult qualities because understanding this fundamentally shifted how I look at history. An occult quality wasn't a demon or a spell.
No, not at all.
It was simply a property of nature that had no known rational explanation at the time. And the classic everyday example from the Middle Ages is magnetism.
Oh, it is the perfect example. Like, put yourself in the shoes of someone in the 13th century encountering a lodestone.
Just a naturally magnetized piece of rock.
Right. You hold this rock near a piece of iron, and the iron violently snaps to it across an empty space.
Like magic.
Exactly. There's no sticky resin. There's no physical hook. It is an invisible, undeniable force. And because the thinkers of the time couldn't measure the magnetic field,
Right, they had no tools for that.
and they couldn't explain the why or the how of that pull, the phenomenon was categorized as an occult quality. It was undeniably real. You could see the result, but its internal mechanism was hidden from human understanding.
Which brings us right back to Isaac Newton and the apple. When Newton proposed his theory of gravity, the dominant scientific framework was a very mechanistic one.
Very much so. Gears and levers.
Yeah, scientists believed that for an object to move, something physical had to push it or pull it, physical contact. But Newton was proposing action at a distance, this idea that the Earth could pull an apple from a tree or the moon could pull the oceans to create tides without physically touching them.
Exactly. And to mechanist scientists at the time, action at a distance sounded exactly like the sympathetic magic used by astrologers.
Wow.
It was dismissed as an occult concept because it relied on an invisible, hidden force rather than a physical, measurable mechanism.
So wait, let me see if this tracks. Calling gravity occult back in the 17th century is basically how astrophysicists talk about dark matter today, right?
Oh, that is a brilliant analogy.
Because it's a force we absolutely know is acting on the universe. We can literally see its gravitational effects on the rotation of galaxies. But because we can't fully measure it or capture it or explain what it actually is yet, it's effectively hidden knowledge.
Yes, exactly. Occult was basically a placeholder for the irreducible mysteries of the natural world. It was where scientists put the things they knew existed but couldn't yet map.
But then something changes.
Right. A massive cultural shift happens during the Age of Enlightenment in the 18th century. The scientific method becomes much more rigid, and the very concept of what constitutes science begins to rigidly exclude anything that cannot be empirically measured and proven.
So anything relying on hidden qualities just gets evicted.
Completely evicted. Occultism starts to be framed as intrinsically incompatible with mainstream science. It gets pushed entirely out of the laboratory.
But the belief in the hidden doesn't just disappear. I mean, if the Enlightenment kicks the occult out of the realm of physics and astronomy, it has to find a new home. It has to adapt.
It does.
And the shift leads to what is arguably the most surprising twist in the historical record. Because to find the birth of modern occultism as a defined movement, we have to look at 19th century France.
Right. The actual noun occultism emerges in the 1850s. It was heavily popularized by a French esotericist named Eliphas Lévy. He wrote a highly influential book on ritual magic, basically claiming to revive an older, lost tradition of occult science. And then a few decades later, in 1875, Helena Blavatsky introduces the word occultism into the English language.
She founded Theosophy, right?
Yes, exactly. Theosophy was this major attempt to blend Eastern philosophical traditions with Western esotericism.
Let's pause on Eliphas Lévy for a second, because the source brings up something incredible here. The historian Julian Strube argues that Levy's specific brand of magic, the synthesis of religion, science, and philosophy, it didn't just bubble up from some ancient underground wizarding tradition.
No, it didn't.
It emerged from the very specific context of radical progressive socialism and neo-Catholic ideas.
It sounds like a total contradiction on the surface.
It sounds beyond a contradiction. I was completely stuck on this. Social reformers in the 1850s. We're talking about the era of the Industrial Revolution. People are fighting over child labor, grinding poverty, factory conditions, material economics.
Right, the real world.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So how does pulling out a tarot card or performing a ceremonial magic ritual help a factory worker? Like, what is the actual mechanism connecting progressive socialism to the occult?
To see the connection, you really have to look at the psychological trauma of France during that era, specifically this period known as the July Monarchy.
Okay, set the scene for us.
Think of France in the 1830s and 40s. The society is caught in this brutal tug of war. On one side, you have the explosive, grimy, alienating reality of the Industrial Revolution. People are being reduced to literal cogs in massive machines.
Just a miserable existence for the working class.
Terrible. But on the other side, the traditional moral authority of the Catholic Church has been severely weakened by decades of revolution and secularism. So you have progressive thinkers looking at a society that is rapidly modernizing, creating immense wealth for a few, but becoming aggressively, soullessly materialistic.
They are looking at capitalism and industrialization and seeing a system that might produce goods, but completely spiritually bankrupts the working class.
Precisely. And here's the crucial part. These socialists weren't rejecting scientific progress.
I weren't anti-science.
Not at all. They didn't want to go back to the Dark Ages. They loved the forward momentum of science, but they were deeply feeling the spiritual void that it left behind. The French scholar Antoine Fèvre notes that these thinkers wanted an alternative to the, quote, vacuousness of materialism.
Vacuousness of materialism.
Yeah. They wanted to cure the spiritual emptiness of the modern age by building a new scientific religion.
So they were trying to engineer a system that organizes society fairly, but also feeds the soul. They wanted to take the ancient wisdom of what they considered true religion and systematize it, to make it as progressive and reliable as a steam engine.
Exactly. They believed that true social emancipation had to include spiritual emancipation. I mean, if you only fix the economy but ignore the hidden depths of the human soul, you haven't really freed anyone.
That makes so much sense when you frame it like that.
And this desire to merge the spiritual with the scientific leads directly to how modern scholars understand the occult today. It represents a massive shift in human psychology.
Right. And our source, Wouter Hanegraaff, he frames this in a really compelling way. He defines modern occultism as the attempts by esotericists to come to terms with a disenchanted world.
That phrase, disenchanted world, is absolutely central to understanding this.
Let's break that down.
So, before the Enlightenment, during the era of traditional esotericism, the world was inherently enchanted. The irreducible mystery of God, spirits, demons, and magic, it was just an accepted baseline of reality.
Right. If your milk spoiled overnight, maybe a spirit did it.
Exactly. Or if you got sick, it was a curse or spiritual imbalance. The magic was just baked into the landscape.
It was just part of the furniture of everyday life.
Right. But a post-Enlightenment, secular society eradicates that mystery. The scientific method explains the bacteria in the milk. It explains the cellular mechanism of the disease. It maps the orbits of the planets. The magic is systematically drained out of the landscape.
So an older medieval esotericist lived in a world where magic was everywhere. But the modern occultists, the ones emerging in the 19th and early 20th centuries, they are living in a completely different reality.
A very demanding one.
Yeah, like the spiritualists holding seances, or groups like the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, who are basically trying to create a university curriculum for ceremonial magic. They're living in a world that aggressively demands proof.
They're living in the age of the laboratory.
Exactly. And our source notes that these modern occultists often distance themselves from traditional faith-based Christianity. Instead, they sought proofs and demonstrations by recourse to scientific tests or terminology.
They are essentially adopting the language of the victor. I mean, if empirical science is the new unquestionable authority in society, then spiritual truths must be proven scientifically if they are to survive.
They didn't want to just pray, they wanted to test.
Right. You had spiritualists trying to literally weigh the human soul, or using terms like vibrations, frequencies, and magnetism to explain ghosts.
So let me get this straight. Modern occultists are fundamentally spiritual scientists trying to peer review the paranormal.
That's a great way to put it, yeah.
Is modern occultism just a massive, complex coping mechanism for humanity losing its sense of wonder?
Well, coping mechanism might sound a bit reductive, but the mechanics of it are exactly that. It's a survival strategy for human spirituality in an increasingly secular, mechanical age.
It's adapting to survive.
Yes. By shifting the focus away from dogmatic, organized religion, these occultists placed a massive emphasis on the spiritual realization of the individual. They were basically telling people, you don't need a priest to act as a middleman, and you don't need to reject the scientific method. You can discover and test the hidden divine forces within yourself.
And that focus on the individual is huge because it doesn't stay confined to secret societies. It lays the groundwork for massive cultural movements in the 20th century.
Oh, without question. This specific, highly individualized flavor of occultism strongly influenced the New Age movement and the human potential movement in the latter half of the 20th century.
Which is everywhere now.
Everywhere. The idea that you can optimize your spiritual self, often using a buffet of practices drawn from Western ceremonial magic, psychology, and non-Western traditions like yoga, that all traces back to this 19th century desire to systematize the soul.
But as mainstream science becomes even more specialized in the 20th century, the gap between the laboratory and the seance parlor widens again, doesn't it?
It does.
Occultism can't keep up with quantum physics or molecular biology in the lab, so it has to mutate once more. And it bleeds heavily into pop culture. By the 1970s, thanks to writers like Colin Wilson, the term the occult becomes a noun that functions as an intellectual wastebasket.
It's such a great term, an intellectual wastebasket.
It really paints a picture.
Hanegraaff notes that the occult became a catch-all category for literally anything that didn't neatly fit into either organized religion or highly specialized mainstream science. Because science rejected them all equally, they all got tossed into the same bin.
So what's in the bin?
Spirits, fairies, parapsychological ESP experiments, UFO abductions, vampires, crystal healing, channeling it all gets thrown into the occult wastebasket.
It's like the junk drawer in your kitchen. You have a battery, a rubber band, and a strange key, and they have literally nothing in common other than the fact that they don't belong anywhere else.
That's exactly what it is.
But out of this messy pop culture soup, a fascinating new concept emerges within the industrial music scene of the late 20th century. The musician Genesis P. Orridge coins the term occulture.
It's a brilliant neologism. I mean, think about industrial music for a second. It was all about breaking down the boundaries between human bodies and machines using synthesizers, sampling, and mechanical noise. They were treating audio cables and broadcast signals as the new magic wands.
Wow, okay.
And the scholar of religion Christopher Partridge took that term, occulture, and applied it academically. He defines it as the new spiritual environment in the West.
New environment.
Right. It's the reservoir, the cultural soil in which new spiritualities are growing today. It's no longer just a fringe, hidden thing practiced in secret lodges. It's part of the everyday cultural air we breathe. It's in our movies, our music, our video games.
And if the occult has always been an attempt to use frameworks and tools to measure the hidden world, it makes perfect sense that occultism would evolve right alongside our modern technology. Media theorists have a field day with this, don't they?
Oh, absolutely. Jeffrey Sconce and John Durham Peters, they point out that occult movements historically utilize new media and apparatuses as tools to reveal hidden realities.
It is a recurring historical pattern. Think about the invention of the telegraph in the 19th century. Suddenly, you have invisible messages traveling instantaneously across vast distances
Yeah.
through copper wires.
Right.
To the average person, that is practically magic.
It is magic. I mean, if a copper wire can carry a human voice across an ocean, why wouldn't you think you could tune that same frequency to carry a signal across the veil of death to the spirit world?
Exactly.
Every time a new communication technology is invented, whether it's photography, the telegraph, radio, television, occultists immediately adopt it to try and capture the hidden laws of nature.
It's like they're upgrading their lab equipment.
Yes. The cultural critic Eric Davis explores this deeply in his book Technosis. He views both ancient and modern occultism through the lens of cybernetics and information technology. The screen becomes the new crystal ball. The digital network becomes the new astral plane.
This makes total sense when you look at modern paranormal investigation. Think about the ghost hunters you see on YouTube or cable TV today. They aren't casting circles of salt on the floor while reading from ancient, dusty tomes.
No, they're using gadgets.
Exactly. They are walking around abandoned prisons with EMF readers, infrared cameras, and digital audio recorders. We've literally gone from alchemy and brass astrolabes to trying to decode the afterlife using a Wi-Fi signal and a battery pack.
And that transition is the perfect synthesis of everything we've been uncovering today. From Newton trying to scientifically explain the invisible pull of gravity to 19th century socialists trying to engineer a measurable scientific religion to save the working class.
Right, up to today.
Up to someone today analyzing digital audio frequencies for electronic voice phenomena. The occult has always been humanity's way of standing at the very edge of our current technological and scientific understanding, looking out into the dark and trying to find the hidden laws of reality.
It really reframes the entire concept. I mean, we started this deep dive thinking about heavy velvet curtains, crystal balls, and secret spooky rituals.
The Hollywood stuff.
Right. But when you look at the actual journey, from the Latin root simply meaning hidden knowledge, to Newton's misunderstood gravity, to Levy's socialist magic, and finally to modern culture and cybernetics, it's not a story of irrational people rejecting reality.
Not at all.
It's the story of people desperately trying to understand it.
The ultimate takeaway here is that the occult is not the opposite of science. It is the shadow of science.
The shadow of science. I love that.
Yeah, whenever society leaps forward scientifically, whenever the light of rational understanding gets brighter and illuminates more of the world, it inevitably casts a new shadow. And the occult is right there in that shadow, adapting to the new language, reminding us that humans will always crave mystery, meaning, and a connection to the fundamental forces we just can't quite measure yet.
It's a reminder that no matter how advanced or mechanized our society gets, we still desperately want the universe to hold a little bit of magic.
Definitely.
Which leaves me with a final thought I want to put out there for you to mull over. If the occult, at its core, simply means the study of hidden forces that dictate our world forces, that have undeniable effects, but no easily understandable explanation for the average person.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
Think about the invisible, highly secretive algorithms controlling our social media feeds, dictating our financial markets, and shaping our digital lives. Most of us, and honestly even the people who code them sometimes, have no idea how they actually reach their conclusions.
It's a total black box.
Right. They operate at a distance. They shape our behavior, our politics, and our society in profound ways we can't fully see, measure, or predict. So aren't those black box algorithms the ultimate occult science of the 21st century?
That is a chilling but entirely historically consistent way to look at it. We are still trying to map the hidden forces pulling at us, only now the digital crystal ball is just sitting right in our pockets.
Something to think about the next time your phone, miraculously, knows exactly what product you were just talking about with a friend. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the hidden history of the occult. Keep questioning the systems around you. Keep looking beyond the obvious explanations, and keep exploring the hidden connections in the world.
Welcome to today's deep dive. You know, normally when you think about discovering something huge, like a new continent or a new island, you just picture explorers physically sailing out into the unknown until they literally bump into it.
Right, because seeing is believing, supposedly.
Exactly. Seeing is believing. But for this deep dive, We are pulling from a really comprehensive Wikipedia overview of Neptune, and it just completely flips that whole idea on its head.
Oh, cool.
Because finding the farthest known planet in our solar system wasn't like sailing to a new island at all. It was more like realizing there's a hidden room in your house purely because you felt a strange draft in the hallway.
That is a great way to put it.
Yeah, and the math just told you a room simply had to be there to explain the breeze, you know?
It really is the perfect analogy. And, well, it's great to be here with you all to talk about this. Because in an age of just massive information overload, where we expect high-definition photos of everything instantly, Neptune really stands as a masterclass in human deduction.
It really does.
It shows us how much we can understand about a world nearly 3 billion miles away through sheer critical thinking, physics, and mathematics, long before we ever actually got a clear picture of it.
So our mission today is to pull back the curtain on this extremely bizarre world. We're talking about a planet that challenges our understanding of fluid dynamics, extreme weather, and honestly, how solar systems even form in the first place.
Yeah, it breaks a lot of rules.
It really does. But before we can dive into the sheer chaos going on inside Neptune, we have to talk about that hidden room. Like, how did humanity actually manage to find a dark, distant world that is completely invisible to the naked eye?
Well, it's basically a cosmic detective story where gravity left the fingerprints. But the ultimate irony here, and this is my favorite part, is that the greatest visual astronomer of his time actually looked right at it and just didn't realize what he was seeing.
Wait, you're talking about Galileo, right?
I am, yeah.
Because according to our sources, Galileo actually spotted Neptune in his telescope way back in 1612, and then he literally drew it again in his notes in 1613.
He did.
Okay, let's unpack this. How does the absolute legend of the telescope just, miss an entire planet?
I know, it sounds crazy, but it really comes down to terrible timing and the mechanics of orbits. So when Galileo observed Neptune, it happened to be very close to Jupiter in the night sky.
Which gave him a reason to look in that direction.
Exactly. But more importantly, Neptune was in its retrograde cycle. So from Earth's perspective, it appeared almost perfectly stationary for weeks at a time.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So Galileo noted it, but he reasonably assumed it was just a fixed background star.
Right, because for anyone trying to visualize this retrograde illusion, think about the last time you were driving on a highway in a fast car and you passed a slower moving car in the lane next to you.
Well, that's a good way to look at it.
Yeah, because for a brief moment as you pull alongside and pass them, the slower car looks like it's sitting completely still or even moving backward relative to your window.
Right, the relative motion cancels out.
Exactly. Earth was doing that to Neptune. We were zooming past it on the inside track of the solar system, making this incredibly distant, slow-moving giant look like just a static point of light.
Spot on. And because Galileo's telescope was, relatively rudimentary, and Neptune's apparent motion was so slight due to its massive distance, the planet's true nature stayed hidden for over 200 more years.
200 years?
Yeah. The real breakthrough didn't come from looking through a better lens. It came from looking at numbers.
Okay, so how did we go from a telescope miss to finally finding it? The source material mentions a French astronomer named Alexis Bouvard in 1821.
Yes, Bouvard.
And he was mapping out the orbit of Uranus, which was, at the time, the outermost known planet. But Uranus wasn't following the schedule, was it?
Not at all. I mean, it wasn't behaving the way Isaac Newton's laws of gravity dictated it should. It was speeding up and slowing down at all the wrong times in its orbit. So Bouvard looked at these deviations and hypothesized that there had to be an unseen gravitational perturber out there in the dark, physically tugging on Uranus.
The draft in the hallway.
Exactly, the draft.
But how does that actually work mechanically? I mean, how does an invisible thing make a planet speed up and slow down?
Well, imagine Uranus and this invisible mystery planet are both running on a circular track. But Uranus is on the inner lane and moving faster.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
So as Uranus approaches the mystery planet from behind, the gravity of that unseen giant pulls Uranus forward, right? It speeds it up.
Makes sense.
But once Uranus passes it and pulls ahead, that same gravity is now pulling backward on Uranus, slowing it down. Bouvard saw this exact pattern of acceleration and deceleration in the data.
That is just brilliant. So fast forward to the 1840s, and we have two mathematicians, John Couch Adams in England and Urbain Le Verrier in France.
Right, and they were working completely independently of each other.
Yes, completely independently. And they both decide to tackle this mathematical nightmare. I mean, they have to reverse engineer the mass and the exact location of a planet that no one has ever seen, purely based on how badly Uranus was wobbling.
It's known as an inverse perturbation problem. And honestly, doing it by hand in the 1840s was a monumental feat of calculation.
Without computers.
No computers at all. So Leverrier finally finishes his math in 1846. He sends a letter to an astronomer in Berlin named Johann Gottfried Galle, basically saying, point your telescope at this exact patch of sky.
And Gall actually listens to him.
He does. Galle gets the letter on September 23, points his telescope, and within 1 degree of Leverrier's mathematical prediction, boom, there is Neptune.
That is staggering. The fact that math can be that precise is just wild. Though I read this sparked a massive, really intense nationalistic rivalry between the French and the British over who really deserved the credit for the discovery.
Oh, absolutely. It was a huge point of pride for both nations.
Yeah.
But, stepping back from the politics, this discovery was an absolute triumph for Newtonian physics.
Because it proved the math works everywhere.
Yes. It proved that the laws of gravity applied consistently and predictably, even at the darkest, coldest edges of the solar system.
So the math worked perfectly to give us a location. But equations on a piece of paper in 1846 couldn't possibly prepare us for the bizarre, extreme environment hiding beneath those blue clouds.
No, they really couldn't.
Yeah.
Which brings us to the physical reality of the planet itself. And this is where things start to just defy our everyday common sense.
Let's get into it, because here's where it gets really interesting. Neptune is 17 times the mass of Earth, and we always hear it called an ice giant, a category it shares with Uranus.
Right, ice giants.
But I have to admit, when I hear ice giant, my brain immediately pictures a giant, solid, frozen snowball drifting through space. But our sources make it clear that is incredibly misleading.
It is a bit of a misnomer, yeah.
Yeah.
At least based on how we use the word ice in everyday life.
Because it's not actual ice cubes.
Right. In planetary science, the term icy is actually a specific convention. It's used to describe a mixture of heavier volatile elements, specifically water, ammonia, and methane.
Okay, so it's a chemical label.
Exactly. This distinguishes them from the lighter hydrogen and helium gases that make up gas giants like Jupiter and Saturn.
So it's not a snowball at all. If anything, trying to picture the inside of a pressure cooker is way more accurate for Neptune.
Much more accurate.
Yeah.
Because beneath its outer atmosphere, Neptune doesn't even have a solid surface you could stand on.
None at all.
None. As you descend, the gas transitions seamlessly into this slushy, electrically conductive layer. This mantle makes up about 10 to 15 Earth masses, and it is a hot, dense, supercritical fluid.
I want to hover on that concept for a second, because supercritical fluid is one of those terms that sounds cool but is really hard to wrap your head around.
It is tricky to visualize.
Yeah, it basically means the pressure and temperature are so extreme that the physical distinction between a liquid and a gas just ceases to exist. It's this crushing, boiling soup.
That's exactly what it is.
And because of those extreme pressures, specifically at around 7,000 kilometers deep, the chemistry inside Neptune does something that sounds like pure science fiction.
Oh, you're talking about the diamond rain.
Literal diamond rain. But wait, how is that actually happening? There aren't just diamonds floating in space that get sucked in, right?
Right, no. It's a chemical transformation driven by extreme forces. That supercritical mantle is really rich in methane. And a methane molecule is just one carbon atom bonded to 4 hydrogen atoms.
Okay, basic chemistry.
Yeah. But as you sink deeper into Neptune, the crushing pressure and the intense heat physically break those chemical bonds. The hydrogen is just stripped away,
Leaving the carbon.
leaving the loose carbon atoms. And they are then squeezed together so tightly that they bond into crystal lattices.
They turn into diamonds.
Precisely. And because diamonds are denser than the surrounding fluid, they literally rain down through the mantle toward the core, like incredibly dense hailstones.
That is wild, just falling through a boiling ocean. And it goes even deeper than that, doesn't it?
Oh, it gets weirder.
Yeah, because according to high-pressure experiments conducted here on Earth, scientists believe that at the very base of the mantle, right on top of Neptune's core, there might be an entire ocean of liquid carbon.
Yes, a liquid carbon ocean.
And those sinking diamonds don't melt. They remain solid and literally float in this liquid carbon ocean like icebergs.
Liquid carbon oceans and diamond icebergs, and it really stretches the imagination. And sitting at the center of all this is a solid core of rock and iron, roughly the mass of Earth, but burning at a blistering 5,400 Kelvin.
Which is roughly 5,100 degrees Celsius. I mean, that is basically as hot as the surface of our own sun, squeezed into the center of a planet at the absolute edge of the solar system.
It is, and that extreme temperature is crucial to understand because that immense internal heat doesn't just stay trapped down in the core, it naturally wants to escape.
Like a boiling pot.
Exactly, it convects or boils up toward the surface. And that upwelling heat is the engine that drives the most violent, chaotic weather in the entire solar system.
So let's trace that heat up into the atmosphere, because this is where the visual chaos really starts. NASA's Voyager 2 spacecraft flew by Neptune in August 1989. And by the way, it remains the only spacecraft to ever visit the planet.
The only one, yeah.
It sent back images of this incredibly deep, vibrant blue world. But it wasn't a serene blue marble. The winds on Neptune hit speeds of up to 2,100 kilometers per hour. That's 1,300 miles per hour.
Which actually exceeds supersonic flow. It's faster than the speed of sound in Neptune's atmosphere.
That is just terrifying. How does wind even get moving that fast?
Well, part of it is the lack of friction. Unlike Earth, Neptune has no mountains or solid surface to slow the winds down.
Oh, right. There's nothing for the wind to hit.
Exactly. But the main driver is the massive temperature gradient. The intense heat from the core is bubbling up, meeting the freezing cold temperatures of the upper atmosphere.
Creating a huge contrast.
Right. That contrast creates massive convection currents that get whipped into a frenzy by the planet's rapid rotation.
And those winds create some massive storms. Voyager 2 observed this huge anticyclonic storm roughly the size of Earth, which they called the Great Dark Spot. It looked a lot like Jupiter's famous Great Red Spot.
It really did. Now, on Earth, an anticyclone is usually a high-pressure system that brings clear, sunny weather.
Right, nice weather.
But on Neptune, these high-pressure anticyclonic storms act like massive atmospheric mountains. They push the surrounding air up, which clears away the white upper clouds and exposes the darker, deeper layers of the atmosphere underneath.
Which is why it looks like a dark hole.
That's exactly why it looks like a dark hole.
But the craziest part about the Great Dark Spot is that when astronomers pointed the Hubble Space Telescope at Neptune just 5 years later, in 1994, it was completely gone. Just vanished.
Dissipated entirely. But the thing is, new dark spots had already appeared in other latitudes.
So the weather is just constantly churning.
Yeah, it showed us that Neptune's atmosphere is wildly dynamic and completely unstable, which is a stark contrast to its planetary neighbor Uranus, which can look almost entirely featureless and blank for really long stretches of time.
Wait a minute, though. Let's think about this logically. Uranus is closer to the sun. Neptune is 50% further away from the sun than Uranus is.
Yeah.
In fact, it receives only about 40% of the sunlight that Uranus gets. So if Neptune is sitting out there in the freezing dark, nearly 3 billion miles away, where is it getting the energy to sustain a more active atmosphere than Uranus?
Now, that energy imbalance is one of the great mysteries of the outer solar system, because the data shows that Neptune actually radiates 2.61 times as much energy into space as it receives from the sun.
So it's basically acting like its own space heater.
What's fascinating here is that it's highly likely this heat is primordial. It's left over from the massive collisions and gravitational collapse during the planet's original formation, 4.5 billion years ago.
Wow, it just held on to it all this time.
Yeah. Neptune managed to hold on to its internal heat much better than Uranus did, and that deep churning heat source is what powers those Earth-sized storms.
But the sun isn't totally irrelevant out there, is it? I mean, even from that immense distance.
Oh, not at all. In fact, a study published in 2023 made a startling discovery about Neptune's atmosphere using decades of data from the Hubble Space Telescope.
Oh, about the clouds.
Yes. Scientists realized that Neptune's high-altitude cirrus clouds, which usually streak across the planet, had completely vanished.
And the immediate assumption you'd make is, oh, it must just be winter on Neptune, because Neptune takes 165 Earth years to orbit the sun, meaning a single season lasts about 40 Earth years.
Right, that would be the logical guess.
But it wasn't a seasonal change, was it?
No, the timing didn't line up with the seasons at all. The disappearance of the clouds was actually linked directly to the 11-year solar cycle.
The sun's magnetic cycle.
Exactly. The sun naturally goes through periods of high and low magnetic activity, and when the sun is highly active, it emits a lot more ultraviolet radiation.
And that UV radiation travels all the way out to Neptune. But wait, how does sunlight physically create a cloud?
It's a photochemical reaction. Think of the UV light as a molecular hammer. When it hits the methane molecules high in Neptune's atmosphere, it literally smashes them apart.
Breaking the bonds again.
Right. Those broken pieces then recombine into complex hydrocarbons, which condense into the white, hazy ice clouds we see.
So it's basically a solar-powered chemical factory in the sky.
That's a perfect way to describe it.
So when the sun quieted down during its solar minimum, the factory shut down and the clouds on Neptune just faded away. That is an incredible display of cause and effect spanning 4.5 billion kilometers.
It really is. It proves that even at the very edge of the solar system, the sun is still completely pulling the strings on planetary weather.
Unbelievable. So we have a planet with a boiling core, diamond hailstorms, and supersonic winds driven by leftover creation heat and solar radiation.
A lot of extreme conditions.
Yeah. But if you think the weather is chaotic, Neptune's magnetic field and its collection of moons are just completely broken.
Broken is definitely a good word for it. Neptune's magnetosphere is structurally bizarre.
Let me try to give a visual for this for anyone listening. Imagine a child's spinning top spinning perfectly upright in the middle of a table.
Okay, standard top.
Yeah, that's how you expect a planet's magnetic field to align straight up and down with its rotation. Now imagine you smack that top so it leans way over to the side and you push it completely off the center of the table.
Right.
That's Neptune. Its magnetic field is tilted 47 degrees away from its rotational axis, and it's physically offset from the center of the planet by over 13,000 kilometers.
It's completely lopsided. And because of this asymmetrical geometry, Neptune's auroras, its version of the Northern Lights, which the James Webb Space Telescope actually recently captured, glowing beautifully. They don't happen at the poles like they do here on Earth.
Where do they happen?
They happen randomly around the planet's mid-latitudes.
But why is it so off-center? Earth's magnetic field comes from our molten iron core. Does Neptune's core just, not work right?
Well, that's the leading theory. Planetary scientists believe Neptune's magnetic field isn't generated in the deep central core at all.
Wait, really? Where is it coming from then?
Instead, it acts like a broken dynamo. The magnetic field is likely being generated much closer to the surface, inside a thin spherical shell of that electrically conducting slushy water ammonia fluid we talked about earlier.
Oh, the supercritical fluid.
Yes. And because it's being generated in a churning outer layer rather than a stable center, the field is wildly unstable and misaligned.
Wow. The chaos just drips through every single layer of this planet. And it definitely doesn't stop at the magnetic field. Let's look at its moons.
Oh, the moons are fascinating.
Right, so Neptune has 16 known moons, but one of them absolutely dominates the entire system. Triton. Triton makes up 99.5% of all the mass orbiting Neptune.
Almost all of it.
But Triton is doing something that fundamentally breaks the rules of planetary formation. It is orbiting backward.
Yes, it has a retrograde orbit. It moves in the exact opposite direction of Neptune's rotation. And mathematically, a retrograde orbit tells a very clear, very violent story.
Because things that form together spin together.
Exactly. It proves that Triton could not have formed alongside Neptune from the same primordial disk of dust and gas.
So if it formed from the same swirling cloud, it would be swirling in the same direction. So it's a kidnapped moon.
Without a doubt, Triton was almost certainly a dwarf planet originally residing in the Kuiper Belt, which is the ring of icy bodies out beyond Neptune.
So think of a world very similar to Pluto.
It's exactly like Pluto. At some point, early in the solar system's history, Triton wandered too close and was gravitationally captured by Neptune.
And when you drop an object the size of Pluto into an existing, well-ordered system of moons, but you send it flying in the wrong direction, I mean, that is going to be a demolition derby.
Oh, it would have been absolutely catastrophic. Triton's sudden, massive gravitational presence going the wrong way through traffic likely scattered, collided with, or completely destroyed Neptune's original system of moons.
It just wrecked the neighborhood.
Totally. It either ground them to dust or ejected them into deep space entirely.
So Triton is essentially the lone survivor of a massacre it caused itself.
That's one way to look at it, yeah.
But this kidnapping story has a built-in ticking clock. Triton isn't going to get away scot-free. Because it's orbiting backward, the tidal friction between Triton and Neptune is actually stealing orbital energy from the moon.
It's slowing it down.
Right. It's causing Triton to slowly, inevitably spiral inward toward the planet.
That's true. It's on a slow death spiral. In about 3.6 billion years, Triton will cross a boundary called the Roche limit.
Okay, can you break down the Roche limit for us? What actually happens physically when it crosses that line?
Sure. So the Roche limit is a critical distance based on gravity. As Triton gets closer, The gravitational pull from Neptune on the near side of the moon becomes significantly stronger than the pull on the far side of the moon.
So the front is being pulled harder than the back.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And when it crosses the Roche limit, that difference in gravitational pull becomes stronger than the physical forces holding the solid moon together. Yes, it will be completely shredded into pieces.
Man.
A feeling of a draft, as you said. It's a lot to take in. But I think the most important thing you can take away from all of this is a profound sense of scale and honestly remaining wonder.
Yeah.
Because in a modern world where we feel like we have all the information right at our fingertips, Neptune proves how much wild, untamed mystery is still sitting right in our own cosmic backyard. We have to remember Voyager 2 flew past it for just a few hours in 1989.
And that's it.
That is the only time humanity has ever been there. The James Webb and Hubble telescopes are doing amazing deductive work from afar, but Neptune is really just waiting for the next dedicated probe to truly unlock its secrets. It's a long time, but it's coming. No, it won't. Which would be incredible.